The Department of Education opposes Connecticut policy of allowing boys who claim to be girls to compete in girls' sports. Under Trump's Department of Education, science trumps the progressive politics of fantasy role play. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with a story out of Connecticut where the U.S. Department of Education, led by Betsy DeVos, and this is going to be one of those Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson clapping images, right? Led by Betsy DeVos, has decided it is unfair for biological girls to compete against biological boys in school sports. And this is common sense, and this is good science, and this is the law. This is what Title IX was meant to do: protect women's sports and make them women's sports and allow women to play sports without boys overriding them. And so this is all around a win-win, win-win-win.
Yes, and the thing is, Connecticut's policy actually allows for transgender girls to compete as girls in high school sports. And the fact that Betsy DeVos's Department of Ed finally came in and said, time out, blow the whistle, foul, any other sports references I can put in there. The fact that we've had, especially in Connecticut, that's where this has been highlighted anyway because of a lot of the track I'm not even going to call them stars, the track athletes. It's been a lot of boys competing as transgenders, going against actual girls who otherwise would have won and become state champions and gotten scholarships for college. But because Connecticut decided that, well, this is our law here, we're going to allow transgenders, girls have been missing out.
Yeah, take a look at that picture, Mike, that you had as the caption clip there. You can see, take a look at who's winning that race. These are African-American young males with African-American young male musculature, right? I mean, they are prototypically different than the girls. They have a huge, I don't care how much estrogen you pump into your body. The bottom line is that your genetic makeup isn't it amazing that the party of science, liberals, the progressives, claim they are the party of science, and we have to be the ones to educate them. The science here is not on your side. Just because you decide you're something, and this is America, it's a great country. You want to be a transgender person, you want to identify with a gender, you want to dress a certain way, you want to get surgery to remove things for your body or add them, go for it. You have every right to do that in this country. You don't have the right to use that perk and privilege to force other people or to harm other people, and you are clearly harming these young girls who, left to their own devices, like you said, would be winning these events as opposed to finishing second, third, fourth, and fifth, and training all their lives for these opportunities and not being able to follow through because some boy shows up at the last minute and is transitioning. Right? And transitioning is one of those things that could take the rest of your life, right? You could start transitioning at 16 by just wearing some lipstick or putting a wig on. That's transitioning, right? You could do this. You could extend this out. And again, why not? Why, if you're a 7-foot tall basketball player who's just not quite good enough to play in the NBA, why not transition? Right? Put blush on your cheeks at every game and go out there and dominate women's basketball. There's literally nothing stopping you from doing that.
And I'm confident enough in my femininity to know that men genetically, just when it comes to sports, have an advantage over if they're competing against women. And I don't care if that's a 16-year-old man versus a 25-year-old woman. It's just that men genetically, and you can't alter that, genetically will have an advantage. And so I'm really proud of, it was actually the high school girls who spoke out about this. They were actually, it was a bunch of, as they say, cisgender, but a bunch of female high school track athletes who said these, and again, I talked about that, the 2 transgender female runners had been having this unfair advantage because they became state champions in Connecticut track. Well, the department, the Department of Ed, said in a 45-page letter that they actually might seek to withhold federal funding over the policy, which allows these athletes to participate under the gender with which they identify. So they're saying the policy is a violation of Title IX, as you mentioned, and that federal civil rights law guarantees equal education opportunities for women including in athletics.
As with everything else, it's only as good as the enforcement. So it's a nice step, Betsy DeVos, but start slapping some penalties on them, and then we'll see what happens. And so this is the consequence of allowing a make-believe world, right? All of this theorizing at universities about moral relativism, everything is relative, everything is subjective, nothing is objective. The war on facts and empiricism and science as white privilege and white supremacy, all this garbage that you've been hearing on college campuses and laughing at for the last 10 years, this is one of the consequences of this, right? That men and women are the same. Right, you nailed it. They're not. By definition, they would not be men and women if they were the same. They are different. And this mythological game we've been playing, that I'm as good as you, that I can do anything you can do better. I can do anything better. Bull. You can't. There are certain things that men can do, and there are certain things that women can do. I'm secure enough in my masculinity to know that when it comes to enduring pain, we're babies. Women are much better at it. Exactly. That's the reality. Oh, but Dr. Pesta, there are exceptions. Of course they are. There are exceptions that prove the rule, right? The fact is that because you've got one woman who's a wuss when it comes to pain and one John Wayne type who can sit there and take a bullet, fine. The reality is that in general, right, women are better at enduring pain than men are. Women are also better long-distance swimmers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Sprinting swimmers are men because of the body, the powerful body, the torsos. But long-distance swimmers are much better and why? You're going to love this, ladies, because the female body has a higher fat content than the man's does, and fat floats, muscle sinks. So technically, women, and I've actually even heard some studies done that women make better long-distance marksmen than men, better snipers in some ways. Yeah, there's a lot of evidence that women, in terms of that kind of precision shooting, are better. So what? Don't punish the women. Don't give gender promotion to men over women. Give men, life jackets to wear when they do long distance swimming as a way to balance it out. Just realize that there are men and women and let them be those things. And you have the freedom in this country to pretend you're anything you want to pretend. Live your life as a woman if you think you need to. Take your testosterone, your estrogen, get things cut off. But it stops. It should stop at what bathroom you use, what shower you use. You have no right to impose yourself on the freedoms and liberties of others. And that especially means taking titles and prizes and competition awards away from girls because you happen to be a boy running alongside them.
On to the next story, which really is a great lead-in from the previous story on the topic of Soy Boys. A Swedish newspaper, good old Sweden, declared that, quote, soy boys are the future of men. But if you actually translate their article, it says that soybeans are the future of men. But it's a Swedish journalist, Jenny Wenberg, who wrote an op-ed in the Aftonbladet newspaper, and she begins, for a long time, soy boy has been a belligerent word in right-wing extremism and conservative circles. The soy boy is the antithetical role of the patriarchal man. He is not aggressive. He is often a feminist. He is also uninterested in traditionally male-coded leisure pursuits. The term derives from a popular theory in right-wing extremes that soy milk contains estrogen and therefore men make feminine and affect fertility negatively. What it's all about, though, is that the macho man, whose main advocate is just right-wing extremist, is on the verge of extinction.
How many times do you use right-wing extremist? How many times?
You couldn't hold off for that last bit.
It's right-wing. So in other words, not only are you telling men that they have to be soft and feminine, that they have to be doughy, that they have to be feminist, right? That they have to become more like women, traditional. So, see, when men assume traditional female roles, that's fine. But asking women to adhere to traditional female roles, that's white supremacy. That's right-wing extremism.
The toxic macho masculinity of the patriarch has not given us much more than shootings, boys who underperform in school, a gender-segregated labor market, men who discriminate against women and beat. It has also given us leaders like Donald Trump and movements like incel, that is, women-hating men who live in what they themselves call involuntary celibacy.
Right, so men who choose not to have sex with women are actually part of the right-wing conspiracy and patriarchy.
Yes.
Men who just leave women alone. Men who want no part of women. That's part of the conspiracy.
Toxic macho masculinity.
And pay attention, America, because this is what happens when you have a feminist government. Sweden famously is a completely feminist-oriented political system. The leaders, even the male leaders are soy boys, right? There is no testosterone in the Swedish parliament. There's no testosterone in the leadership of Sweden.
Are we talking about Canada? Oh, sorry.
Well,
Sweden.
Trudeau is, in fact, he should be a Swede, right?
He's so sweet.
He's so sweet. Yeah, just think Justin Trudeau about the few, or Barack Obama, if you want, because the soy boy knows no racial limitations. However, this is what you get. I mean, notice what they've done. Feminism is literally an excuse to trash traditional masculinity. Men who are assertive, men who are confident, men who are brave, men who are sacrificial, men who are protective. These are all now negative concentrations of men. This is what negative attributes of men. And so in order to fix that, men have to become what traditionally macho men thought women were, right? And so you see how nicely this fits.
Well, and she cites the University of Stockholm data.
Oh, well, there you go.
So it's factual here.
Swedish academic males. I would never believe it. When I think of a Swedish male professor, I was thinking Rambo. You're telling me that the University of Stockholm in Sweden? Tell me about Stockholm.
Okay, well, their data claims that changing norms in young men in Sweden has reduced levels of crime overall. She says that the crime of younger men has diminished and is now approaching that of women. And she acknowledges that gun crime in Sweden has increased in recent years, saying that firearms violence only affects a small group of the population.
Oh, that's nice to know.
According to a report released in September of last year, the overwhelming number of shooting suspects in the southern city of Malmö were from migrant backgrounds.
Yeah.
As is also a majority of the convicted rapists.
So the primary shooters and the primary rapers in Islam are non-soy boy Muslims. Yeah?
I mean, the University of Stockholm releases it. Yeah, I can't even defend that.
Yeah. And the question becomes, how come these brave feminist women, these pasty, doughy white feminist women, right? How come they can't call out machoism in Islamic culture? How come they have to minimize the violence done? And notice the implication here. White men are the men who must be demasculinized. We, being white Swedes, and we can't tell Islam what to do, and we'll just ignore the fact that the rapists, the primary rapists and the primary murderers are very, very macho Islamic men. But we won't try to soy boy them.
No. But
is soy halal?
I don't
know. Can you eat soy in Islamic culture?
Sure.
I mean,
That's
when Muhammad was sexing up his 12-year-old girlfriend Aisha, I mean, is this a hate crime offense? Where are the Swedes? Where are you? Where are you, Swedes? Feminist Swedes. What are you gonna do for Omar and Muhammad? What's your program?
Oh my. Anyway, she ends the article with, because even though, and we're talking about the soy boy, because even though he is hated by right-wing extremists, it's quite obvious that the soy boy, unlike the macho, has a role to play in society.
Well, I can only say this. When the so-called migrants are the majority in Sweden, the one redeeming thing about that will be watching these feminists now chained to their ovens, naked and barefoot and pregnant. Because that's what's going to happen. You think the Swedish males that you've doified are going to come to your defense, feminist women of Sweden? No. When the country is, and let's be very politically correct, when the country is majority migrant, these feminist women are going to be pregnant, barefoot, and chained to their saunas. Right? Because that's what's coming for you, and there will be no Swedish men able to help you. In fact, the Swedish men will be the gatekeepers of the harems, right? How about that?
Since we're on the topic of migrants, the Trump administration actually just announced plans for expulsion of thousands of Chinese graduate students in our country who have any ties to the Chinese military schools. According to a New York Times article, American officials are discussing ways to punish China for its passage of a new national security law intended to enable crackdowns in Hong Kong. But the plans to cancel student visas were under consideration before the crisis, actually, over the law, which was announced by Chinese officials. Administrators and teachers have been briefed in recent years by the FBI and the Justice Department on potential national security threats posed by Chinese students, especially ones who are working in the sciences. And as we've been reporting over the past couple of weeks, this is an extension of what's been happening with American professors or even Chinese professors working over in China and then double dipping with, security threats over here.
It absolutely amazes me how things like multiculturalism and liberal white guilt and made up patriarchal stories like the ones we saw in Sweden. It's amazing how academics and so-called smart people are not the least bit bothered by people from aggressive communist nations stealing technology, stealing ideas, using the opportunity that they've been given to send spies and plants over here. This is undeniable now. You've got all sorts of professors, not just Chinese professors. You have American professors taking as much as $50,000 a month from China
from
to
Harvard.
promote
Harvard professor.
a Harvard professor. Right? And now you've got these Chinese graduate students, and it's you can always tell because they look like they're 40 years old. A lot of these graduate students, they come to America and they're literally 40-year-old. They've got a fake passport that says that they're 22, right?
Yeah, they're not. I've had some in my department.
Yeah, of course you have.
And I wasn't even I was in the soft sciences, the political science. And these graduate students were 40, 45. Like there's no doubt. No doubt. But that's okay. That's in terms of if they are a good grad student. But anyway, President Trump was actually informed of what this plan is, and it's came from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who told him. And we've, again, talked about this. It's called the 1,000 Talents Plan. Yep. And people should really look that up if they don't know what it is. And this is where the Chinese government had hired, a lot of American professors even, but Chinese professors, to give away science secrets, especially in chemistry and physics and in all of the STEM areas, essentially.
When you step back and look at what China's done over the last couple of months, how they're lying, they're literally lying to the world. They are using their influence, even though they pay a very little bit of money, they're using their influence in international organizations like the World Health Organization to marginalize Taiwan. They won't let the Taiwanese participate. This is not a World Health Organization if you are discriminating against Taiwan, right? And so Donald Trump was exactly right to pull out of this. The Chinese are using including the United Nations, they're using international organizations to unmake liberty and freedom for people across the world. That includes the liberal progressive idiots in this country who think that they're always going to have their liberal progressive freedoms. Well, it's the same thing that's going to happen in Sweden. When Sweden does finally become a migrant majority nation, all those liberties and freedoms that you have for homosexuals, for soy boys, for women, they're going to be curtailed. Same thing's going to happen here. I mean, it's almost as if the authoritarian left just can't wait to have Chinese overlords. Let's just do it now. Well, I remember about 8 or 10 years ago, there were people actually writing articles saying, we welcome the Chinese takeover of Western culture. We welcome their logic and their sobriety and their secularism and their wonderful abortion program that saves the environment by aborting any child a woman conceives over the one-child program, right? They were welcoming that with open arms.
And we know the defense of basically China takeover is happening at the university level because we just got a report out of the College Fix that they actually got a hold of a letter which is discussing how the universities are under investigation by the Department of Ed because they're trying to actually block Congress from getting records that detail their ties to China. So the universities are lawyering up and trying to block it so that any information can get out about the truth with what they're dealing with China. So we've talked again about how these professors are getting paid. And now in February, the Ed Department announced it would be investigating Harvard and Yale for failing to report hundreds of millions of dollars in foreign gifts in contracts. We've talked about this type of stuff before. And the department has said, once again, it began reapplying pressures in July of 2019 to begin reporting all this foreign funding. $6.5 billion in foreign money so far has been unveiled.
These same liberals fake righteous indignation over Russia.
Yes.
Right? Russia this, Russia that, simply because it's going to go after Donald Trump. So Russia, led by Vladimir Putin, who is a KGB guy, right? Mm-hmm. Typical communist guy from his days before the fall of the Berlin Wall. That's bad. But Chaikovs, who are even more brutal, even more technocratic, even more censorious, that's fine. And the only thing I can think of is that to the modern progressive mind, Chinese people aren't white. Russians are. I can't think of a single other reason why Russia matters now. Well, we know why. Russia matters because they think they can hang it around Trump's neck. But the Russians are white. So maybe that's what drives the irrational and overblown dislike of Russia. And look, I'm not saying Russia's not trying to interfere, but they're not sending tens of thousands of Russian graduate students over here to steal our caviar recipes. The Chinese are doing that. And you got to wonder if that it's the racial thing for liberals. They're not white, and so therefore they're not a threat, even though they're threatening us in way more ways than the Russians are right now.
Let's get right to today's Real Education. Cool Tombs appeared in Carl Sandburg's second collection of poetry, Cornhuskers, published in 1918. Cornhuskers focused on different aspects of Midwestern America, the land, the people, their values, and their dreams. Like many of Sandburg's poems, Cool Tombs combines details of history with events in the lives of the common man. The poem describes the equalizing role of death, where both the famous and infamous, the powerful and the ordinary individual come to rest in the cool tombs.
Yeah, and Carl Sandburg is one of the great forgotten American poets. I mean, Robert Frost is a great legacy, a lot of 20th century American poets, but Sandburg really is a remarkable guy. He wrote one of the absolute best biographies of Abraham Lincoln. If you ever get a chance to read Sandburg's Lincoln, it is a masterpiece. I read it as a sophomore in high school, the school I went to. Really a great, great piece of historical writing. And, of course, he's a wonderful poet, too, and really an American original. He's got the love and the concern for the common people that the beat poets had. He's got the awareness of the pristine nature of American environment, like some of the more radical poets do. But it's never political with Sandburg. It's always beautifully and philosophically expressed. If you go to this poem, Cool Tombs, right? It's got a jazz tone to it, cool right? Cool Tombs, right? And it's all about, I'm just going to read it and we'll comment on it a little bit. When Abraham Lincoln was shoveled into the tombs, he forgot the copperheads and the assassin in the dust, in the cool tombs, right? And you get the idea of these cool, not the frightening image of the grave that we have, right? But these cool tombs where people like Lincoln become something bigger. And Ulysses Grant lost all thought of conmen and Wall Street. Cash and collateral turned ashes in the dust, in the cool tombs. Pocahontas's body, lovely as a poplar, sweet as a red haw in November or a pawpaw in May. Did she wonder? Does she remember? In the dust, in the cool tombs. Take any street full of people buying clothes and groceries, cheering a hero or throwing confetti and blowing tin horns. Tell me if the lovers are losers. Tell me if any get more than lovers in the dust, in the cool tombs. And you could almost hear like a jazz saxophone in the background low, right? Kind of turn the lights down. And it's also, on top of everything else, it's a cool tomb poem. It's really cool. But it's also a vanitas. We looked at, earlier this week, we looked at the vanitas image of a Dutch painter. And it's this idea that, on the one hand, be cool, man. You're going to be dead soon. Not in a threatening way, not in a hostile way, but in those cool tombs, right? All those things that make life such a burden. It's going to melt away a little bit. I mean, it's almost like you really need a jazz score when you're listening to Carl Sandburg.
And there you go. As always, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. Now, let's wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. 1900 was the first time women were able to participate in the Olympics. At the time, there were 22 women of the 997 athletes, and they competed in tennis, sailing, croquet, equestrian, and golf. And archery then was added in 1904.
Where's the boxing?
Oh,
I mean, those sexist men. Women weren't allowed to box. They weren't allowed to wrestle, right?
wrestle.
Wrestle. Okay. Well, I'm sure we're going to update that now. Maybe I'm looking forward to seeing what the Swedish Olympic team looks like. They're going to trot out the Soy Boys, right? That's going to be something to see. And that's going to do it for our show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. And until next time, in the words of the Swedish chef, oinga boinga doinga boinga.
What?